Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Apex Podcast. I am your host, Jan Almasy, and today we are going to have a local treat for all of those that are from Canton. He's rolling his eyes at me on the camera. For all of those that are here from Canton, Ohio. If you have been reading anything to do with high school sports when it comes to the Canton Repository, you have more than likely come across this gentleman's name at some point over the last, well, we'll say since the 90s. He can kind of open up that story when we start discussing his timeline. But there are what I am really excited about to showcase inside of this episode, is these people that are what I like to say are invisible pillars of the community, right? Like people that are in the background. They're not always, they're not like the mayor. They're not this like forward-facing political figure, but they're somebody whose presence is known, and inside of the community can have an effect. So, Mike, I would like to welcome you to the Apex Podcast, my friend. Thank you for taking the time to come talk to me.
Oh, thank you very much. Glad to be here and finally get to meet you this way.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's just start with, where were you born and raised? Were you born and raised in Canton? Did you kind of come here from another place, or let's just start with where you grew up?
Actually, I am from Stark County. I was raised in Navarre, went to Fairless High School, and went on to the University of Akron, and was fortunate enough to be able to find a job at the repository about a year after I graduated. A lot of people who were in the newspaper business, at that time, they probably would have had to get started at maybe a weekly or a smaller daily. But the repository in a mid-market, to be able to start out way back in 1990, I was pretty fortunate with that. I knew some guys who worked here. I was able to work on a part-time basis for about 9 months. Basically, the job back then was all the box scores that you see in the paper, all the write-ups from games that are not covered by a staff member here. That's what me and a couple of other guys did back in the day. And that's who put that stuff together. So that's how I was able to get my foot in the door here. And a couple of the guys who worked here, namely Rich DeRozier, who came back and was the editor here at one time, and is now the communications director at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and Mark Craig, who covered the Browns way back in the day and has been up at the Minneapolis Star-Tribune for the past couple of decades covering the Vikings in the NFL. From what I understood, they told Bob Stewart, who was the sports editor at the time, hey, you got to give this kid a chance. We have an opening here, see what he could do. So I got that chance. I'm really thankful for that opportunity. I'm thankful for people who, like Rich and Mark and Bob who believed in me. I'm really thankful for them for allowing me to have this opportunity. And I can't believe it's been 32 years since that. Time flies, and
Right.
It's been fun. Got to do a lot of interesting things, meet a lot of interesting people, and I couldn't ask for more.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful the way that you phrase that. That this is that I'm thankful, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I think that that's such a feeling of that can drive people forward, right? Like that expressed feeling of gratitude. I just got done before this. I recorded a podcast episode that was very deep philosophically. So if I'm still in that mind state throughout this interview, you'll have to forgive me. But like, I think that's that framework, of recognizing what was happening at the times, and that this wasn't just a daily or a small weekly, that this was, at the Canton Repository. Like, I'm getting the chance to work here. And one thing I'm really curious about is, for those of my audience that are sub, 20, right? They don't even understand the concept of dial-up internet, let alone a world without the internet. Right. And so when you're talking about gathering these scores and making sure, like, that was all prior to digital. So how were you just driving high school to high school? Or how were people calling in and giving you the scores and such? Or
Well, yeah, that's how it worked. Back when I was in high school, that was my job for the basketball team, was to call all the newspapers, report the box scores. Basically what you
Hmm.
do is people are assigned at each school to call us and give us the box scores. And back then it was pretty tedious because you had to type, every name, like in a box score: Smith, 2 field goals, 0-0 from the line, 4. So that's kind of the way we did it. Nowadays, it's much easier. It's much easier. People, we send a box score form out to schools, and a lot of them send it back the way we asked for it, and we're able to cut and copy and paste and move it into files. But yeah, back in the day, that was the way you gathered the information from games. And I started back. I didn't start back in the typewriter days, so I don't know what it was like for folks who didn't have a laptop, or what they called a VDT at the time.
Mhm.
I didn't know what it was like to how you were able to turn in your story off of a typewriter. So, back then, what we used to do is we would write our stories on our laptops, and we would find a phone line and send it over a phone line, and that's how it was transmitted. But it's a
Mhm.
lot easier these days, because right now, I mean, I could write a story on my laptop that I'm talking to you with right now. Once it gets edited, I can publish it and post it on our website just like that.
Right.
So, and those who design the papers, it's easy for them to grab. So yeah, it's been a lot of changes in that regard.
Right, right, and that's something that I've been really fascinated with, just, um, over the course of especially the last 20 years. A lot of the stuff that I've been choosing to write about recently on my LinkedIn and on my blog have been, how technology is kind of this exchange, right? It's like you can give technology something and it'll replace it and do it sometimes more efficiently, but then that means that it's taking a piece as well, right? Like you said, I have no idea how these people survived with typewriters.
Right,
But the beautiful thing about being a human is they figured out how to survive with typewriters, right?
right, right.
And they were able to make it work. But then that skill set, right? There's like a piece of it that the next generation of people are like, how did you do that? And that effect on like a big scale is the pyramids, right? Like we look at the pyramids now and we're like, how the hell did they get everything so perfect?
Right.
And like it would cost us billions of dollars to do that nowadays, and we have no idea how they pulled it off. But somehow, at that period of time, with human intelligence, they were able to pull that piece off. So, you know, as you've been a part of this community, and being in the industry of the newspaper and stuff, there has been all of these massive technological advances that have kind of happened. But I feel like the beauty of storytelling hasn't necessarily changed a ton. Like maybe the styles or the ways that we put them out, like some things are shorter, like tweets, you only have 140 characters to convey something. But that internal need of consuming stories and like consuming good writing still gives people that, like, that warm and fuzzy inside.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's really changed regarding that. I think the only thing that I could say is that's what's changed is the ways you can tell a story right now. I mean,
Mm,
back when I started, um, all you really had was your laptop. You go to a game, you write about what happens, and that's it. The beauty of it now is, we can tell stories not just by the stories we write, but on podcasts that we do.
mhm,
During football season, we do a couple of podcasts a week regarding a recap of games on Friday nights, and a preview of games on the upcoming week, which is really fun for me because as I told you before we started this, I originally wanted to get into broadcasting.
right.
So after all of these years, I'm fine. Our business has ways where I can, utilize some of those tools. I mean, it may not be out on television, it may not be out on the radio, but it comes out on our website, and it's kind of the same thing. Regarding social media. I mean, when I first got on social media, one of the reasons why I did it was because there was a situation where I forget where I was at the time. I was out. I wasn't in the office. I wasn't at home. A story broke. I had no way to do it right away. I had no way to get it out there right away. And now with Twitter and any forms of social media, we have that opportunity. Oh, such and such coach has been hired at this school. Well, we can get that right out no matter where we're at, and then follow up and do a story as we've normally done in the past. So I think, as times change, I think people like me has to adjust to the change. And, I've been in the business long, but I'm not, it's my way. I'm going to do this forever. I have to adjust with the times, or else I'm not going to be good at my job. I'm not going to be successful. Right. I'm not going to, provide what my employer, wants me to provide, and what the readers are interested in.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that interest in broadcasting, when you went to this University of Akron, what track were you on when you were in school there?
Well, I spent the last 2 years there at WCIP, which was really, really fun. I'll still maintain it was 2 of the best years of my life. Not so much because I got to do things that I wanted to do eventually in life, which was, report sports, go out to games and do play-by-play. That's what I really wanted to do. But the people that I met, still friends with today. My boss here, the sports editor, Chris Bevan, he was a year younger than me. We both worked at WCIP. I mean, it was so much fun. And I'm glad to see they're as successful as they are, because back then, that's kind of, I think what made it so popular with us was they adopted a top 40 music format. I mean, they played songs that, people our age listen to, whereas other college stations might play like classical music or something like that. But, when I was looking for work, I think one of the things I did was I kind of didn't put myself out as far as like applying in other states, because I was an only child. I thought, you know what, if I got married and started a family, I didn't want to go too far away, for my parents' sake, because love, to see them have experience grandchildren and stuff like that. So, maybe if I would have looked beyond Ohio or something, maybe I could have stuck in the business. But I had experience writing, and I found, I found that to be the path that I was able to take. I got some experience doing part-time work for one of our writers now, Steve Dorshik, who was the sports editor at the Independent at Massillon. I gained some experience doing that. I got my foot in the door here, and this is where it's taken me. And I got no complaints about not having. I got no complaints about not getting into broadcasting, because I'm still very fortunate, still very blessed to be able to do the things I've done here, to see the things I've done here. Maybe if I would have went into broadcasting, I wouldn't have been able to do that. Maybe I wouldn't have been able to go to a World Series. Maybe I wouldn't have been able to cover LeBron James during his first couple of years in the NBA. I mean, maybe it worked out. Maybe it worked out that way for the better for me.
Yeah, I think that's something that I really, if you're listening to this right now and you're in a position in life where you're, faced with decisions, or maybe you didn't quite get the job that you wanted to get, or you applied for something and life didn't kind of take you your way. I always like to say, and Mike, just for your background and on where I'm coming from this, I went to school for nursing and clinical psychology. was in the military as a technical sergeant, looking at a set of captain's bars, and then left all of that behind to start a business based on a podcast that nobody had any idea what was going on with it at the time, right? And it's like I really had to get over, like, I had built all of this stuff up in my mind, like, this is what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna do this, and this is how it's gonna go. And then life was just like, no, that's not where we need you. Like, you gotta go do this. But I look back now, and similar to what you're saying, is like, look at all of these things that I've had the opportunity to do at this point. And, long story short, for everybody that's listening, I want to pull out of that is, sometimes life might decide it's going to go off a like slight degree path of where you think it's supposed to go, but don't question what types of potential possibilities can be unearthed from that.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
that life is
that's
a beautiful thing one way or the other.
right. Yeah, and that's what I would hope young people look at this and think, hey, I could do I could, there's so much potential for me out there, and hey, if something's not working out, don't force it. Don't force yourself into a a job of unhappiness or whatever like that. So yeah, I
Well,
mean,
and like what you were saying earlier is that you took this job at the repository, and it may not have been broadcasting, right? And so
right,
it may not have been that thing that you thought you really wanted to do. But what you said that was really beautiful to me right there is that I wanted to structure my life in a way that was like, I know I'm an only child. I want my parents to be able to experience grandkids. I want to, there's these things in life that I'm choosing. And it's like, I chose that, and the repository manifests itself. And now you have a path towards the things that you chose to prioritize. And that's what I try to convey to younger people. And I say this lightly because I'm only 26, so I'm not that far removed. Right. But all the thing that I constantly try to remind myself is I get to choose. I
right,
get to choose what I'm going to focus on. I get to choose my values. I get to choose the way that I interact with people and how I put myself out into the world. I cannot choose how the world decides to act towards me. But I can take this job that isn't necessarily the job that I wanted and make it beautiful and exciting because look at all of these things I get to do now with this awesome group of people.
right. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
So what are some things like, so you got into the repository and you have this job, right? And you're interacting with your friends and you're getting these games scores and you're really dipping your toes into like being a part of the community at this point. What was it like kind of melting into that relationship with the community, being, starting at where you were at and then eventually kind of getting to this path of sports writer?
I'll be honest with you. It wasn't as easy as it could be for some people because one of the things throughout my life is it always took me a long time to really get to know people.
Hmm.
Okay. I went to a parochial grade school in Navarre, went to Fairless. A lot of people that went to my school, um, went on to Central Catholic.
Hmm.
I had to get to know a lot of different people, and it was tough at the time. And then you go on to college, and you get on to having to meet a whole group of people. So um, I had to I had to I had to really, well, okay. I grew up in Navarre, Ohio. How am I gonna go get to know somebody from Alliance or somebody like
Right.
that or whatever?
That's why I was asking the question in my head. I'm like, it's got to be complicated. There's so many different areas because you were covering Stark County. Is that like the county as a whole?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's so like Alliance is totally different than Massillon Jackson, is totally different than Canton South. I mean, we're all kind of rooted around the same thing, especially high school sports. We're all pretty unified around how much we care about that. But
But the one thing I was gonna also add though was what kind of made it easy is people are easy to get to know. I mean, people, hey, I've heard about this coach, from who's been coaching at Jackson basketball for so many years. You get to know him, no problem. Kids kids, high school kids, college kids are so down to earth. A lot of them, especially the athletes, they're really easy to get to know.
Mm.
So I eventually didn't have very many problems, once I was able to kind of, you know, kind of, you know, get to know people and stuff like that. And the other thing, is, because we're in the city that has the Pro Football Hall of Fame, you know, we do every year these big write-ups about all the Hall of Famers that come in. So I'm coming in and I'm thinking, boy, oh boy, I get to talk to these people. I get to write about them. They're so famous. How am I going to be able to, how am I going to be able to do it? Well, the first one I did was a guy by the name of Bob St. Clair.
Mm.
And you probably don't know who he is. A lot of people probably have no idea who it is. You know, it was it was one of the best. He played for the 49ers back in
I was gonna
the
say, yeah. Can you give us a little background on Bob?
yeah, he played back with the 49ers back in the 50s when they first came in the NFL. But the thing I found out was, man, here's a guy who played in the NFL, who is going to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame and stuff like that. And it was so easy. It was so easy to get to know this man. They gave me his phone number, called up. Hey, I'm Mike Popovich from the repository in Canton. Like, I'm writing your bios about the Pro Football Hall of, getting into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. A number of stories. Like to get talk to you. No problem at all. No problem at all. So, you know, going back to kind of where this started, me being a little hard getting to know people I don't know. People, Hall of Famers, athletes, coaches, they help make it easy because, they're just, you know, they like the attention that people like me give them, and stuff like that. And, they want, athletes want their stories told, and coaches, their teams are having real good seasons. They want to get that out there. So, those people helped me kind of get over that hurdle that I had as far as, like, as you said, melting in, and stuff
Right.
like that.
Yeah, because I think that when we go into having conversations with people, sometimes we build up the conversation in our head prior to actually getting on the phone or meeting them in person, and then it's like you mentioned, like, oh, this person has X, Y, and Z, insert here qualification, right? Like, oh, I can't believe that I'm getting the chance to talk to them, and you get all this, and then you talk to them and you're like, wow, another human being, you know,
Right.
and
Right.
and getting the chance to have those conversations and peel those layers back are really, really cool. And then the opportunity to have that is probably, I can't even imagine just interviewing all the people that you've been able to interview over the years. Um, when it comes down to interviewing and stuff, part of journalism is kind of being able to melt into the community and kind of form those relationships. But I feel like another piece is maybe um, getting better at asking questions. Um,
Right.
and kind of developing this sense or this intuition for how to draw stories out for people. Because a lot of times, and I'd be curious to see your thoughts on this, is like I'll interview somebody and we will get to a place where I ask a question and I can tell that they know what they want to say, but they're having trouble articulating what they want to say. And it, immature me would just give them a statement and be like, "Oh, you're saying this," and they'd be like, "Yeah, I'm saying that." But then as I kind of interviewed more and more people, I realized, no, maybe I just ask another question, and in the answer, they'll find their answer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think back when I first started, when you talk about, interviewing people, you would go into this with a set of questions, and
Mm.
that's okay. I mean, you probably, before you talk to me, you were probably thinking, well, I'm going to ask him about these things and cover these topics,
Right.
and that's perfect. But for for a good interview to work, I think you kind of have to go away from that a little bit, especially depending on how somebody answers a question, and like somebody says, I a basketball player who's on a good streak right now, hey, I've come back, I'm having this, good streak. Coming off a year of maybe an injury or something like that. I mean, just throwing out an example like that. Well, you
Mhm,
just
mhm.
can't, just if that's news to you, I mean, you just can't, I'll go off to the next topic. It's like, well, what was your injury? What happened? Was it a big challenge physically or mentally to be able to overcome that? I mean, you could come up with a couple of stories, depending on how you ask questions, how the interview goes, and goes like that. And I look at interviews. I see some people, in the media. It's got to be like this. It's got to be like this, like formal stuff or whatever. I mean, press conferences I really don't like because
Right.
it just seems so rehearsed. It's not one-on-one stuff like that. And I you know I like personal stuff like a conversation you and I are having right now. I mean,
Mm,
that's what I
mm.
like with athletes and coaches, that one-on-one thing. It's just you and I talking. It doesn't have to be, it's all, on the record unless you say it's not. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be so rigid and stuff like that. And so, I think, I've learned to kind of, through the years, knowing these things, come up with better questions, ask follow-up questions, if you hear something, that can go into another direction.
Yeah. I have a buddy of mine that's actually our podcast producer. His name's Noah Jones, and he went to, I want to say he went to Ashland. No, he went to BG for journalism. And me and him were talking the other day. We were talking about a lot of how the same skills that you learn when it comes to exactly what you were just talking about, asking questions, the ability to ask good quality follow up questions, the difference between open questions and closed questions. Like there's all of these things that you study that are just literally centered around this topic of asking a question, right? Like people are like, oh, that's simple. You just ask a question. It's like, well, it's actually this nuanced thing, that you get better at over time. And we talked about how cool is it that those same skills are what allow you to form better relationships with people. I'm like, you really want to form a good relationship with somebody? Listen twice as much as you talk. Ask them questions about themselves. Ask them follow-up questions about things that make them passionate. They will leave that interaction with you so excited to talk to you again that
Right. Yeah.
it works out perfectly. And you may sometimes didn't even have to say anything, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The best, they could fill your notebook or fill your recorder, depending on what you ask. And another thing I think that's really important is that, a lot of people, say, and I'm not in this group because I don't cover the team at all, but the Browns season, this past season,
Mm.
it's like, not expect, wasn't what a lot of people expected. And I hear sometimes on sports talk radio, callers come in, critical of the media, why aren't you being harder on the quarterback or harder on the coach when you're asking the questions? Well, yeah, you can't always, you don't want to throw softball questions out, but you want to form a question where you get a response from that person, as good of a response as you can. Because, if you're defensive, they're not obligated to answer your questions. So, that's I think what's important as well. I mean, you want to, you want to be You want to be tough, you want to be fair, but you want to elicit some type of a response from them. And that's
Mm.
because if you don't, you don't have a story. You don't have a story. If I, whether I'm interviewing a pro athlete, a high school athlete, or whatever, they're the ones that help you form that story, and you got
Right.
to be the one that asks the questions that helps them, give those answers.
Right. Do you have a favorite question or a go-to question that you enjoy? Maybe like
Uh,
you could even at different demographics or something?
I don't know if I do or not. I tried, especially for young kids. I try to help them, you, not be so nervous because,
Right.
I'm a reporter. I mean, I'm not a guy who's on TV a lot or whatever, or was on the network news or something like that. And so I don't know if I have a go-to question. Sometimes I try to loosen things up a lot,
Mm.
like last night. I went to a basketball game at Malvern to do a feature story on the basketball team, in general, and because they're having another good season. And the superintendent, who's a really good guy, his name Mark Scott. He sees me over on the other side of the gym, comes over, he takes a selfie with me, and then he puts it out on Twitter and stuff like that. It's stuff like that. And now that's his. I'm not so much a selfie person, but that's fine. Whatever. So I talked to some of the players after the game, and they say, "Hey, it's nice to meet you. I love your tweets and stuff like that." And I said, "Well, yeah, I saw your." And yeah, I said something like, "Well, your superintendent takes better selfies than sports reporters do." Just kind of loosen things up like that. So
Right.
you know, go-to question, I don't know, but I one thing I want to try to do is help people be relaxed,
Mm.
kind of like, you're doing with me and, right here and stuff like that. Just you and I having a conversation and stuff like that. And, if you do that, especially for young kids, I mean, you'll find that they open up to you.
Right. Well, uh, I worked for a little while, about a year in trauma psych. So when I left the hospital and I was transitioning into owning my business full time and doing more of like the branding, consulting, and business development and ghost writing and copywriting for execs and stuff, I was kind of in this transition period, and I had left the ICU and the ER at Altman, and the business wasn't big enough yet that I was really paying myself anything decent, so I needed to try to find this bridge. And the bridge ended up being working as a psych nurse at National Youth Advocacy Program here in downtown. And one of the things that I noticed inside of that space that I think is really akin to what you're talking about is this thought process, and I learned this from the counselors there, right? Of creating space for conversation. And what it does, there's a reason why they call icebreakers, is because it's meant to be. It's gotten a little gimmicky now, but it's meant to be this low level, low barrier to entry, no right answer way to break through the ice of like a social dynamic, right? And just make it real and make it human and make it personable. And so, especially with kids, with high school students, so much of their persona in their personality is caught up in being an athlete, in being the president of NHS, in being this person. And so for you to be able to come in there and be like, hey, I understand that, I'm a reporter, but, and you guys are on this team and talking to me might be nerve wracking, but like, here's a joke to kind of bring me back down to your level, forms that relationship with them rather
Right.
than
And
asking them
what
questions.
Right, and a lot of times, in another example where I've helped them become relaxed and everything is, and I see this more on social media where you might see, okay, such and such football player from this school has committed to this school, and you want to throw that out there, and congratulations. Congratulations to such and such. He's committed to this school.
Mhm.
And then they'll give you a response. They'll say, thank you for doing that. But a lot of times, the majority of the times, they'll say, thank you, Mr. Popovich. And I understand, it's out of respect and everything like that. But I always like to tell them, hey, with me, it's Mike. Mike is just perfectly fine. I always say Mr. Popovich was my old man and stuff like that. So, with
Right.
me, it's Mike. So I mean, I understand the respect and everything like that, but that's, hey, just me. That's it's another way to help them relax and have them get to know you or whatever like that.
Right. Right. So one of the other things I was thinking about prior to coming on, and getting the chance to sit down and explore your story and everything is the amount of state championship teams, high school wise, that we've had in Stark County, period. Like, is just awesome. I mean, like, we're like, I remember being at Canton South and competing in baseball. Like, every year we're going to districts and certain seasons, but you've gotten to watch these ebbs and flows, right? It's like Stark County as a whole is always competitive at the state level, at least for my recollection, right? But it kind of shifts from school to school over years, and classes come through and stuff like that. So, what have been some of the moments over the course of, like, people going to state in these awesome areas where you've seen, like, communities rally around teams, or have been able to, like, be really excited about covering anything in those realms?
Well, I'll tell you what, for the better part of, I want to say, the last 15 years, one of my responsibilities has been cross country and track and field.
Mm.
And you talk about state championships, whether it's team, whether it's individual. I mean, that is a story that those sports in itself
Are just
have,
insane. Those sports are bonkers.
right.
My cousin Ben Lahody is a runner, and, well, actually, him and his sister both, I think, cross country, and they are just, I will never understand why somebody does that long of a distance, basically sprinting for fun. Like, you know?
I got to know. I didn't know that. I didn't know you were related to him. Andra is one of the nicest
Yeah.
people and one of the most competitive people I have ever met. And I am so much happy. I am so happy for the success that she's had. But I'm amazed at pole vaulters, distance runners, uh, long jumpers. I mean, throwers, sprinters. It's just nonstop. I mean, I remember before we started this, Stark County may have been lucky to get maybe a state champion or two at the state track and field meet. I remember years recently where we've had 8,
Yeah.
maybe
Oh, yeah.
9, and teams. I remember wasn't too long ago, St. Thomas Aquinas won boys and girls state championships team. And it was fortunate that one of my colleagues was there with me because we each took, each team deserved a story. He took one and I took one. And that's those sports in itself. And I always say this, to people don't understand how much runners put in to their sport. I mean, people might look at it and say, how hard is it? You run around the track and stuff like that. Nobody has any ideas how many miles your cousins, all these other people put in to make themselves successful.
It's absolutely insane. It is a dedicated lifestyle. I mean, it's no different than wrestling, no different than, like, at least that's the lens that I look at it through, right? Is like, it's diet, it's workout regimens, it's dedication, it's actively choosing to embody, being a cross country or a long distance runner. Because, like you mentioned, in track and field, all of those events are super different. Like, the sprinters are horrible distance runners. And the distance runners,
Well, yeah.
are not always the best sprinters, but because they chose to, like, okay, I'm going to focus my attention on this one part and get really, really good at it, they have to pour everything into it.
Well, and you find some that are multi, you know, you don't find sprinters who are distance runners, but you may find a distance runner. An example, Josh Conrad from East Canton, who's up at Walsh University right now. Really, great distance runner at East Canton. Also a very good high jumper. Finished, I believe, state runner up at the state track and field meet in the high jump as well. So those have been, I mean, if you those right there have been, when you look at high school sports that I have done, so many great stories. I mean, this past fall, 3 state championship cross country teams from Stark County, East Canton and Marlington boys, Minerva girls. It's unheard of. That's really unheard of. It's a lot of work, from my end, not as much work as these athletes put in, but it's fun. It's fun to be able to report those stories, unique stories like that.
Right. Well, yeah, I think that, those stories going into the community. I remember having a conversation with, the name is going to escape me. It doesn't really matter. But the conversation as a whole was basically that, no matter how advanced technology gets, there's always going to be something about being able to give somebody something physical that they can look at that has them on it, that somebody else took the time to tell their story, and grandma can put it up on the fridge, or you can actually physically hold on to it. And whether or not I am, I necessarily believe that to a core that it needs to stay physical the whole time. The concept that I pulled out of that is that there are very few moments in life where you feel more like appreciated and gratified than when somebody else takes the time to tell your story. And like those athletes, when you take the time to do that reporting and they see their names appearing in the paper and like their, the difficulties that they've encountered, and, you articulating to people, this is how much effort these people put in. Like, this is insane to me how much they pour themselves into this. And this is the results. And when somebody sees that in front of them, it is so amazing what it can do for their quality of life, the way that they look at themselves, the way that, there's a whole slew of things that is positive for. And so I'm wondering, as you're writing these articles and stuff over the course of your career, has there been this awareness of like, or like a sense of responsibility almost that has developed over the years when it comes to the work that you do, and the weight of like, actually telling people stories and what that means for them?
That's an interesting question. I I think it just comes down. You get in this business. You just gotta be passionate about what you do, and the people you cover.
Mhm.
You you gotta have a balance. I mean, okay, one thing is, and this is a lesson. You can't be a fan. You can't be a cheerleader for these people, openly cheerleader, because that's not that's from a
Just
reporter
being a
standpoint.
fan. Yeah,
That's
it's not being a reporter, it's being a fan.
right. And you got to be fair and everything. That doesn't mean you don't want them to do well. I mean, people you meet, I mean, especially from people around here, do East Canton, Marlington, Minerva cross country teams. Did I want them to win state championships? Yeah, it's good for them. It's good for me. It helps me tell the best story, the the best story I can. So you responsibility. If you're looking at responsibility, it's doing your job to the best you can as professional as
Right.
you can, and I think that's what That's what that's what I try to do. I mean, that's what I try to do.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, it kind of all comes back to just this, like, I'm going to be passionate about my work, and that kind of fixes everything. It's like, if I'm passionate about doing what I do really well, then that means I have to be able to create good space for people in conversations. I have to be ethical and honest in my writing. I have to, like, there's all these things that you have to do if your focus is being really good at your job and passionate about your work. Um, so yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. That you find those stories, because if you because you're passionate, you are able to be present, and actually enjoy. I love that you articulated, consistently throughout this episode. You said, we had 3 teams go to state, and it was Stark County. That's unheard of. This is fantastic. And for those people that are fans, if you lost out to one of those teams and you're still in Stark County, you might be rooting for them, but there's still this sting, right? Because it's not you. But like, from the reporter's perspective, it's like, look at what we're doing as a county. This is so beautiful that we've been able to do this. And I think that that's really speaks to true testament to the fact that you do your job well. That this is something that you're, like, so excited about, that it comes out naturally in the way that you talk about things.
Yeah, I don't think I could do my job well if you're not passionate about sports in general, or the people you cover, because it would I think it would show up in the writing.
Right.
I think it would show up in the writing. It's such and such scored 22 points as such and such school beat them 62-54.
Right.
Who cares? I say who cares from the standpoint of not the outcome of a game, but that type of reporting and stuff like
Right.
that.
Right. It's very dry, very unidimensional type of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They always back in the day, they'd always say, make sure you get the who, what, where, when, and stuff like that in a lead and stuff like that. Well, when I started out, leads were kind of tough for me and stuff like that. But you gotta come up with ways to be able to draw a reader into wanting to read your story, whether it's about whether it's about their school or not, or stuff
Right.
like that.
Right. Now, one thing that kind of, that I've been curious about, throughout pretty much this entire episode, is you seem like a very creative person, right? Like the way that you speak about things, the lens that you're, like, looking at the world through, like, you pick up on things, that are capable of feeding that passion, right? Like, if we weren't aware of the beauty of life, sometimes it can get really dull. And we all go through those periods of time where, maybe we look outside, and instead of looking at the snowflakes, we look at all of the slush on the sidewalk. Um, for somebody that's listening that, like, might want to be a writer someday, or might want to get into broadcast speaking, or might want to get into a place where their job requires them to form relationships and stuff. With writing specifically, I know for me personally, it was rough when I first started writing. Like, draft after draft, imposter syndrome on, like, putting things out. I didn't want to post stuff. There was things where I was like, man, like, I just can't quite grapple with this. So I guess this is kind of a two-part question, but, like, when you first started writing, what was it like for you when you first started realizing, like, I'm releasing these articles to the public? Like, it's not school anymore. This is the real world. I'm writing and people are reading my stuff. And then on the second side of that, like, have you developed things, or do you have any advice that you could pass down for somebody that might be struggling with writing, and say, like, these are some things that I've done to maybe allow myself to be more fully present in my writing versus, feeling like it's templatized, or I'm not quite getting my ideas across?
Well, the answer to your first question is, when did you realize that this was reality, is what you're doing? I think it's probably the first time I saw my name published
Mhm.
was the first. this is my work and stuff like that. It was I remember when that was. It was about a high school basketball game. Wasn't a great basketball game. It probably wasn't a great story that I wrote either, and stuff like that. But I think that's what it kind of hits you. It's like, hey, this is your work here. And this, as far as any advice is, nobody who wants to be a reporter, whether they work at a newspaper or they're a reporter. I mean, you got reporters, a general term right now, because radio, TV has reporters, websites have reporters like that. Whatever avenue you take, you're not going to hit a home run on your first story. You're just not. I mean, it's just, and the thing is, like in any line of work, it just comes down to practice and stuff like that. Try to do better on the next story. Try to do better on the story after that. Whether it's the writing or the gathering of information. I remember when I was young, and the term deadline started to creep into my life and stuff like that. Well, when I was young, it took me a while to be able to compose a good game story and stuff like that. And now I've only got 45 minutes to do it. But when you find the practicing and the amount of stories that you write, as the days go on, as the weeks go on, you're going to find it gets easier and stuff like that. I remember when I was young that you used to rely, say you went to a basketball game or something like that, used to rely on a lot of play-by-play in your story as far as, what happened during the game like that, because especially when I was first starting to deal with deadlines, that seemed to be the easiest way to be able to get stories done in time. So I had them done in time. Well, as it turns out, I mean, I don't find those stories to be that really interesting and stuff like that. I mean, especially if a game is 63 to 30 or something. I mean, how much play-by-play are you going to put in for that?
Right.
But as time went on, it just seemed to get a little bit easier to kind of avoid that and put in as many interesting aspects that I could, whether it's about say like a Malvern team who's gone 14-3 right now, who graduated 2 1,000-point scorers, and how do they keep this run going or stuff like that, or a player who's had a very good run who themselves. I think of one in mind that I can think of was a basketball player up at Mount Union named Christian Parker, who went to Glen Oak. He's their leading scorer. He's been the Ohio Athletic Conference Player of the Week 2 times this season. He's their 6th man. He comes off the bench for them and stuff like that. And I don't know if I could have written a story about that, when I first started out, but it just goes back to just to practice and practice, make every story.
Right. I think it's cool, like, because you really kind of identified like 3 different layers of storytelling, right? It's like, okay, very immature, not so many details version is this was the score and this was the score, high five, and I'm out, right? Like that small section. And then you added this extra layer that's like, okay, well, here's the score and then here's the play-by-play. And that's an evolution. It's like, okay, well, I graduated from this part and I need to go to this part. Now I'm in this play-by-play portion. And you're like, well, I used to include a lot more of that into it. But then there's this other echelon. It's almost like the archetype. It's like this overarching why the story is a story to begin with. And that's what I love about what you just said about Malvern. It's like, this is a story because this team did X. They graduated this person or these 2 people. they're continuing this. How are they going to keep it up? It has contention to it. It has a little bit of like grit and resolve is necessary in order to keep moving, and it has suspense in it, and like you're bringing some of these concepts that people generally associate with fiction into this non-fictional space, and it conveys this extra layer. So I think it's awesome how that's evolved, over time. And if you're listening to this right now and you're like, well, I'm just getting started into writing, and maybe you're just at that stage where you can just write the scores, just keep practicing. Like
Right. Yeah. Like I said, you're not going to hit a home run right away. It's just not. And it's no different than other things in life, whether we, no matter what thing you do. I mean,
if you were to
you might
go back and listen to the first podcast episode I ever recorded, Mike, like, oh my God, is it atrocious? Right. And I think it's atrocious, but there's people still consistently listening to it on a regular basis, but I go back and I listen to it and I'm like, welcome to the Apex podcast. I'm Jan Almasy. This is, I sound morbid. like I had just watched a kitten get run over in the street or something and immediately went to go record the podcast. And now, obviously, I'm vivacious. Like, this is me. This is the full version of me behind a podcast microphone at this point. But that's taken, I think you're going to be like episode 84, 85. It's taken a lot of episodes, interacting with a lot of people and telling a lot of different stories to get comfortable with it.
You'll be twice as better at 170 then, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then like next thing I know, I'll be looking back and be like, man, I can't believe that like I started a podcast in my college apartment with 2 different types of microphone and a laptop that didn't work half the time. And now here we are wherever I'm at a decade from now. But if I were to stop podcasting altogether, and this is the cautionary tale that I want to tell anybody that's in this space, if I were to stop podcasting today and I stopped pursuing or writing or whatever I was doing, if I stopped pursuing that, whether it was for work or for like, I have a bunch of friends that just write for pleasure. They journal, they do, other things like that in order to help them sort through their thoughts. The minute that you stop engaging with it is the minute you stop getting better. Right? Is like, if you don't, I know that it can be uncomfortable sometimes writing stuff down or putting things out into the world for other people to read or see. If you're not ready for that, maybe you're just sharing it with a close friend or your parents, or like, but if you feel like you're called to do something creative, don't be afraid to at least show somebody, like just put it down and get over that first hump, because it's irreplaceable to be able to start down that path, I would say.
What do you have to lose? I mean, what do you have to lose if you do that?
Right.
I mean, like I said before, you learn. You just learn. That's the only way you learn.
Yeah. Well, so I know we're coming up on our hour here together, and I want to make sure that people are able to follow your amazing tweets. And make sure that they are able to keep up on. So if you are from the Canton area and you are interested in things to do with sports in our local area, where can people find and interact with you, Mike?
Well, I mean, I guess the easiest way would be on Twitter. It's MPOPOVICH, capital REP. And, we find stories, people give tips, on that way. I mean, we find out about, this is we're heavy into signing season and commitment season for high schoolers and going to college, and try to put something out there every day, whether it's at an event I'm covering or it's a story I've published. Put out a story today about a thrower from Hoover by the name of Steve Arnold, who signed with Ashland. And a lot of people know Judd Logan from North Canton was the head coach at Ashland before he passed away. And Steve Arnold exchanged text messages with Judd Logan when, he was making his commitment there and stuff like that. And he didn't know that Judd Logan was in the hospital at the time. So, and he had a framed photo of Judd Logan at his signing ceremony yesterday. So,
Wow.
I mean, that's just an example of, we share sharing stories, whether it's, stories we've written, stories we hear, anybody is welcome to chat and stuff like that. And, that's the way we go here.
Heck yeah. Well, for everybody listening, if there's anything inside of this episode that you found particularly interesting, and you want me to try to sucker Mike back into talking to me for another hour, feel free to shoot me a message. And if there's something that you would like to explore more when it comes to, some of the things that he may have experienced over the years, I would be happy to annoy him, and try to get him to come back and say hello. So go ahead, Mike.
I'll say something else too, and something that I really want to do. If anybody has any questions about what I do, is, like I said at the start, I had people help me out a lot. I want to give back to people your age and younger like that, who might have any interest in the field. I'm always open to any questions that they have.
I would love that. And I would wholeheartedly take him up on that, because I can say firmly after this conversation that I'm definitely grateful for the fact that you are a member of our community, Mike. So I appreciate you. And I will talk to you on another episode, maybe someday in the future.
Oh, cool, man. Anytime. I really enjoyed doing this with you today.